everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on climate change. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. Robin Daly. Mr. Robin Daly, what you want to discuss about climate change and perhaps you attend different business activities or conference. So what's your experience? What you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, sure. Well, climate change has become a serious problem. Just this last week, University of Oregon released a report that indicated that temperatures were growing at an alarming rate, far faster than we've thought of before. And I concluded that if we don't reverse this problem by the end of the century, up to 50% of the world may be uninhabitable, which would be problematic. That means that children being born today or this year, when they reach my age in their 70s, they'll be facing a relatively dystopian existence where much of the world is uninhabitable, and much of the food service sources have expired, and so we'll have shortages of water, shortages of food, shortages of living conditions that are conducive to human life. So much smaller and probably drastically reduced population. Because the world simply wouldn't be able to sustain the populations that we have today, and that's in 70 years. Many of the changes, of course, we're already seeing. The oceans are already becoming too warm in a number of areas, killing off coral reefs and entire species. So we are in the midst of a mass kill-off event with insects showcasing some of the early signs of this death, and then death of both land and sea animals coming on top of that. Our moves to restrict the use of fossil fuels, which are largely seen as the cause of the problem, coupled with large-scale ranching of cattle. The changes haven't had a material impact on the underlying problem. In other words, the underlying problem continues to get worse. So if we don't get more serious about this and get more serious about this more quickly, our ability to sustain ourselves on the planet is going to be substantially reduced. Now, in the tech sector, there is a significant effort to reduce the use of fossil fuels, that reduce the use of power and water on a broad scale, but the tech industry all by itself isn't capable of turning this thing around, and it does require kind of everybody. And recognize that a lot of the tech sector's goals are 2030, 2050, and the 2050 goals in particular just aren't soon enough or large enough to even make a difference in the industry. Some outliers are companies like Apple, who have become far more aggressive, and Microsoft, who plans to reverse their impact on the planet all the way back to when they were founded. But they're outliers. Most other firms are not as aggressive, and the end result is we're not making the progress we need to make. So those are my opening comments. We're in trouble. It's getting worse, and we're not doing enough to fix the problem.
Thank you, Dr. Taman. Now, what do you want to discuss about climate change?
Yeah, climate change is something which is the changes which come in the climate over a period of time due to natural variations or due to human interference in the whole ecosystem, destroying the ecosystem themselves. And rather than being a product of natural variation, it is largely human done thing. So as Dr. Margaret Chan would say, that it's what we are going to face now is public health issues. So public health is something which is majorly going to be the focus of world scientists and social scientists world over. And till the time that doesn't happen, people will keep seeing different kind of mutations and variations of uh, of genes, or for example of viruses, new viruses coming in. For example, the nuclear uh, gas can be used for certain positive ways, but it can also be used in negative. Hiroshima and Nagasaki are issues in front of us. So till the time that doesn't get sorted out, we are at the print amount of, we are at the point of structure where we are destroying ourselves. We are wanting to, now what we are also planning to do is pollute the sky. So because they feel that world is less for them, so they should explore space. Definitely explore space, but please don't pollute places. Because more people, more nations have more ambitions, and that is what is happening. River, coastal areas, for example, the environment at the coast, where the rivers are there, are majorly destroyed. And so for example, in Hinduism, uh, we drop the ashes of our ancestors. Sometimes you see bodies coming over. So all these things have to be taken care of, because it's destroying the river majorly. So yeah. Malaria, for example, is a major problem in Africa. So many of these things have to be sorted out, and there should be no selfish uh, ambition in this. This is our world, and no country is not our part of our culture. Every country, for example, is our country, and if their pollution levels are high, it's a cause of caution to all of us. So we should see that the world being pollution free, and the greenhouse effect, for example, the ozone layer, etc. As all of us know, we are taught in schools, for example, for several years now. But still nothing special is happening on those fronts. We are still seeing depletion of ozone gases, and like ozone layer. So heat stress, for example, is another area. That increasing of temperature. So I mean, if that happens, that that glaciers are going to melt, and rivers level would seas level would increase, and many of these island countries would be destroyed. So many of these things we have to cater to, and we have to see that public health is cons- is the world's major should be the major agenda of the world right now. And UN should focus on public health majorly. And in that, we should not drop poor countries. Poor countries are the ones in South Asia, Africa, where resources are less, and we need more resources. So helping each country develop their own infrastructure, and not getting into the debt trap, because many of these countries, African countries, who are taking debt from China, are majorly into debt traps. So to take care of that particular aspect, we need to help them develop their own infrastructure, and have a democratic system, so that they have regular elections rather than armies ruling them. So these things are all connected. Democracy is connected to um, environment. So I mean, if democracies are there, chances of people involvement in the whole system is much more there. When people participate, we have seen, in Narmada Bachao and the Andolan in India, or Chipko movement. Many of these movements are there where people were involved, and people sorted out so many of the problems of which the people in the areas were facing. So yes, these are my opening remarks.
Mr. Rob, as climate change is a major problem right now, so what type of innovation can be helpful for emerging economy to handle this climate change?
Well, do recognize that a lot of the things that you can do to offset climate change are things that you should be doing anyway, like reducing levels of pollution. It's kind of interesting that a lot of the things that are contributing to climate change are also things that are polluting the air and water, the air we breathe and the water we drink, and the food sources we consume. Plastics, particularly microplastics, have become a significant problem, and of course, they're an offshoot of petrochemical uh, refining. So if you can cut back on the use of fossil fuels, you change the economics of the creation of plastics, and then have programs that encourage people to use renewable retainers of glass containers that can be washed as opposed to plastic containers that are thrown out over time, and continue to go through what are the causes of the pollution that you're enjoying and begin to eliminate them one by one through a combination of penalties and incentives. The big thing is to make sure you're not encouraging bad behavior. Subsidies applied to industries that are known as heavy polluters should be discontinued and exchanged for taxes that are designed to offset the pollution these companies and entities are creating, thereby kind of creating a more balanced ecosystem. We have a significant problem both in the developed and developing worlds with regard to just excessive pollution and discarding things that shouldn't be discarded in landfills. Lithium-ion batteries, for instance, are things that should be recycled instead of disposed of because the lithium is toxic, and you don't really want the lithium getting into your groundwater or entering into your food chain. So making sure that you're doing things, whatever pollution's being created is being corrected at the source, either through a combination of incentives and penalties, or through recycling methods that allow you to keep that material out of landfills and out of the ocean for an extended period of time. And then the industries that you develop around those practices are industries that can be used to generate country revenue. In other words, if you're really good at recycling, then other countries will send their recycling material to you for you to recycle them. But you do have to make sure, because we certainly saw the problem in developing countries in the past, where they quote unquote take the material to recycle and they're not recycling at all. They just become a dumping site, and that would exacerbate the health problems in the developing country, not eliminate them. So do be careful that when you take on that particular role, you are recycling and able to resell the materials that you've recycled, that they're not going into landfills and you aren't creating a toxic mess in your own country because you're inefficiently recycling the materials that you're receiving. And also with regard to technologies that are greener, certainly the creation of ultracapacitors and solid state batteries are thought to be a game changer with regard to electrical powered vehicles and machinery. And again, that's something that can be, once mature, those kinds of technologies can be sold nationally and internationally to develop country revenue. The goal shouldn't be just to create green industries, but to create green industries that provide a return, because that return then allows you to increase your investment, increase your overall climate saving footprint. Where if all the activities are cost forward, in other words, if they don't generate profit or some type of offsetting revenue, then you can't sustain it. The money will run out. The one administration will be replaced by another, and the programs will be killed. So as much as possible, these industries have to be thought of as being not only sustainable from a climate standpoint, but sustainable from an economic standpoint. Otherwise, it's unlikely they'll be continued, or they will survive long enough to make a difference. So it's really about thinking strategically about the health of the people, about the health of the land, about the health of the nation. And the health of the nation includes the economic aspects of creating programs that are self-sustaining at a minimum and strive to be profitable at a maximum, so that they're generating revenue, and as a result they'll be sustained and continue to be funded and make the difference you'll hope they'll make. So that would be my advice.
Dr. Tamanna.
Yeah, so as Rob is also saying, I personally feel that wind, solar, and to a certain extent, nuclear energy should be used to preserve the world, different worlds. Nuclear energy is also obviously only available in many countries, developed countries mostly, and so the poorer countries need to. Understand that if we harness nuclear energy, which is a clean energy, that can be done, but there would be again the 5 Security Council members who would be against this kind of a move. So I guess we need to do away with weapons as much as possible, because they are not doing a great job for us, and we need to have, for example, what is called climate sustainable technologies. So so for example, water electrolysis and decarbonization. So these things have to be followed, and a wide range of carbon emitting activities in the use of hydrogen produced with renewable electricity by electrolysis is vital for a successful energy transition and achievement of international climate targets. So many of these things are prerequisites for a world which is wanting to survive, let's say several thousand more years. Otherwise, by 2050 we'll be a total mess. The earth would not be able to take the whole thing. Now, for example, in religions, you see, I mean in India, for example, you have the earth seen as the mother, and so, but how much of effort is being taken to take care of that mother? So I guess most cultures revere earth a lot, and so we have to have that kind of empathy towards our own people, our own poorer friends, and also people who are are in need of these technologies. So yeah.
Mr. Rob.
Yeah. What? Okay, I guess I'm continuing.
Yeah, specifically, like, what is your advice for the emerging economy?
Well, I did that. I kind of did that last round. The other things that can be done for any economy, emerging or otherwise, is focus on those technologies and products that are much more efficient in the use of energy. The LEDs for lights, moving away from fossil fuel energy production to nuclear, geothermal, wind and solar, when possible, and then looking at creative ways for energy storage, hydro lift, weight-based, gravity-based solutions. Oh, and I should point out, if you're near a coast, the generating methods that use ocean flow, wave generators, generators that work off the tides, tidal generators, are also relatively inexpensive ways to generate power, and they're sustainable, and in some cases they work better than wind and solar because they operate 24/7, as opposed to just during sunlight or just in the late afternoon, early evenings when the sustaining winds are blowing. And then when you're talking about windmills, I look at offshore windmills where the breezes tend to be, or the winds tend to be much more consistent than the same mechanisms onshore, and offshore have less obstructions to block the wind as well. So the wind tends to come through with less turbulence, so it makes it a little easier on the windmill generators. And then look at at some of the underlying industries that are causing the problems, and make sure that those industries have incentives to move to greener technologies or adjacent areas that in themselves are less destructive of the environment. All help. If you try to shut down some of these large industries by fiat, you'll quickly find that their ability to influence the political process is significant, and you'll probably fail. For instance, here in the United States, the petrochemical industry has a fairly strong hold on one of our two parties, making it very hard to make any type of a lasting change. And so you want to make sure that when those dynamics exist, you're providing incentives to migrate the industry to something that's more sustainable, as opposed to trying to force them, because you may find that they have the power and you do not in a political arena. So it's acknowledging the realities that you have to deal with, and finding a path through the political obstructions you're likely to have to accomplish the goals that you want to accomplish, and recognize the danger is real and it's present. And it's not going to be just for your country, but it's going to be for your neighbors, and in fact, all the countries around the world. If we don't do this together, no one country, with the possible exception of China, since they're generating about 50% of the pollutants currently, could make a significant enough change alone to reverse this particular cycle. So obviously it does kind of include, if you've got economic connections to China, probably assisting the pressure into making that country, as well as the U.S., greener than they currently are, and more contributing towards the better future, as opposed to being one of the problems that has to be solved. In China's defense, that they have been one of the most aggressive in terms of creating solar energy and solar technology. But then again, their problem was arguably the worst in the world as well. So they were certainly incented to start making a lot of changes, because a number of their cities had become massively unhealthy. And that becomes problematic in terms of sustaining the population and keeping medical costs down. So they're motivated, but everybody else needs to be motivated as well. And as I said before, focus on technologies wherever possible that can be exported and that can generate profits, so that the profits can be used to further those technologies, and expand the good that you're attempting to do by applying the greener technologies to the existing problem. And then I'll pass.
Yes, so I guess
Yes.
sorry. Yeah. So I guess democracy and environment are intertwined together. Till the time one doesn't exist, the other cannot exist. And I mean, I'm not trying to say that autocratic countries would not be doing that. For example, Saudi Arabia is doing a lot of work on this particular aspect, and they have a lot of technologies in this particular area. China is doing a lot, but yet this is a problem that if when people revolt against government's policy, that is not going to happen in these countries. So, for example, in India, we had many movements where environment became a major issue, and so governments had to hear the whole issue. So, for example, in West Bengal, we had this nano car issue. So the government had to change the because they were like destroying the the forest there, etc., for launching of the industry. So what they did was they shifted to Gujarat, where the environment would be much conducive for nanotechnology, nano cars. So yes, so I feel that democracies can handle these situations better. Though in fact, on the other hand, if you see, autocracies have much more power, because citizens are more like subjects. They have to listen to the government. So if government is keen on having a certain structure, or a certain a certain uh, way of looking at environmental issues, the people will have to listen. So that's rare. That rarely happens in democracies, because democracies are dependent upon people for every elections. So the politicians, for example, would not do some great job as far as this particular aspect is concerned. So so biot fuel, for example, it's a fuel for the future. We have to think not just about our generation, we have to think about 100 generations following us. If that kind of futuristic thinking is there, chances of we developing as a world together, and not destroying, for example, there were cases when we had nuclear waste being dumped in Bay of Bengal. So Bangladesh and India, totally, we are all together in this particular area, and it affects our health. It results in different kind of diseases, and so that is the whole thing. And to achieve active climate neutrality, we also need to think about our fuel. So what will drive us in the future, what will be good for our next generation, which other technologies for climate changes can be evolved. So we need to see what kind of new technologies can be there, which would help the world to uh, be more sustainable, and reduce the CO2 emissions, as biofuels would help in that particular area. And oxy-fuels, another area would be there. Change mindset coming with technologies for climate change must also take place in the constructive industry. So, as approximately 8% of global CO2 emissions are attributable to the steadily growing cement industry. So many of these industries are harmful for human beings and and the public health in general. So the future would require that we look into the whole issue of public health in a major way, and as far as possible, take recourse to allopathy, as well as the natural techniques which have been taught to us in every cultures. For example, be it in indigenous population in Canada or US, for example, they have their own systems. So for example, India has its own, we have Unani, for example. So many of these things, Ayurveda, for example, yoga, and helping each other through other sources. These techniques need to be distributed equally worldwide, so that what really happens is that we are able to benefit from each other. After all, health becomes the major problem for the world, and till the time that is not restored, no other development would anyways be happening. So it's our it depends on us how we look at the world, and the responsibility is with the developed world, and developing world obviously following suit. So yeah.
Yes, Mr. Rob. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Specifically, when we discuss about climate change, if you share some of your view about carbon credit, because I think our audience want to learn more about carbon credit.
Well,
If you have
carbon
some
credit,
idea about carbon credit.
yeah, carbon credits are something that's traded between companies. I'm not particularly a fan of it because what it does is it allows a company that is being very efficient to trade that efficiency to a company that isn't very efficient, so that that other company can meet their carbon reduction goals. So it's kind of a tax, but it's a tax paid between companies as opposed to a tax paid back to the government. And there are issues. One of them is that the carbon credits that are purchased have to be true carbon credits. That means there needs to be some kind of oversight to assure the carbon credits being sold are in fact valid carbon credits. In other words, that there has been some material effort to remove carbon from the air in some shape or form that falls within the guidelines of carbon credits, therefore can be sold. And many cases, that oversight is either not adequate or doesn't exist. And so the end result is you can get a lot of game playing with carbon credits. Placing the government at the heart of carbon credits, um, along with oversight, could possibly offset this. But I'm a big believer in just making sure that companies are incented to reduce their carbon output. And if carbon credits are issued, they're done connected to something like carbon capture, so that companies are incented to create carbon capture mechanisms, and then and then that carbon capture effort can be aggregated and made more efficient. And therefore, when companies are buying carbon credits from another firm that is doing carbon capture, you're getting a material benefit. The carbon they're producing, or some percentage of the carbon they're producing, is being captured by the carbon capture companies. But right now, that mostly isn't the case. There are a number of ways to generate carbon credits, carbon capture only being one of them, and depending on the area of the companies and the mechanisms. And so my view is right now carbon credits have a big problem with regard to being accurate and creating the kind of benefits that the programs were designed to create, and doing so effectively over long periods of time. So I'm not a big fan, primarily because carbon credits can be granted for things other than carbon capture, and they really should be tied to carbon capture mechanisms, so that the people buying the carbon credits are truly offsetting the carbon that they're producing. And they're doing it with better economies of scale. So they are getting an economic benefit by aggregating their efforts, and those efforts are resulting in the offset that was intended by the carbon credits. And the goal is to reduce carbon. It's not to create yet another financial mechanism, another form of currency, if you will, that people can trade. The goal has to be tightly focused on removing carbon from the atmosphere. And right now, the carbon credit mechanism is not as tightly focused as I would like.
Dr. Tamanna, you want to share any view about carbon credit?
You're muted. Unmute. You're muted.
Yeah. So
Can
LZC or low and can you hear me? Yes. So low and zero carbon technology is the term given to technologies that emit low level of carbon. So there are number of technologies, for example, right now available, which are used to provide heat for building emitting low or no net CO2 emissions, such as solar hot water, air source heat pumps, ground source heat pump, combined heat and power, biomass heating, efficient gas boiler, solar photovoltaics, wind turbines, combined heat and power. So some of these uh, technologies can be provided via communal system. So the community coming together, and these these technologies are also not so expensive, and they're also very environment friendly. So I guess these technologies need to be used uh, as far as possible, and more so, we need to develop new technologies as much as possible, and do research on that. We have been doing research, but like now it should be done at war footing, because climate cannot take more of pollution which the world has got itself into. The wars right now, the two wars which are going on right now, and it's almost like a third world war, where you see the countries divided into separate camps. And the pollution, through these weapons which are being used, I guess if better sense was prevailing, for example, you have feminist ecologists, they would say that if women were there, chances of wars were less. Though we cannot blame all men for that, but like generally, from the time of the rise of civilization, we have seen it's been man's rule, man's world, and they have been doing this to the world, you know and this is a reason of wars. And so if women were more included, chances of better ideas coming up. I'm not saying men are not giving better ideas, but this is what is really happening. You see, even if we don't want to blame them, but whom to blame. So I guess 50% are women, so at least 30-35% women should be included in parliaments and local body communities, where where actual decision making takes place. So that kind of an education is must. We have our many senior scientists like Vandana Shiva, etc., who have done work on this front, and as a scientist, they have advocated the need for a world which is uniformly uh, concerned with the uniform livability. So livability of Earth is only going to increase if we charter new paths and look for other alternatives to wars, and the sickening rate of pollution which we face. So all these things together would be able to make a better world, and for generations, the generations are going to thank us for being the generation who is now working towards that particular front.
Thank you, Mr. Robin Dalip. How we can save uh, more women, because climate change heavily affected in emerging economy, and women and children also getting involved in this crisis. So how we can do that?
Sorry, you have to clarify the question. How can we serve more women, involve more women? Obviously, I'm a guy, so probably a question that should be asked of a woman. But if you're asking
How we can
more,
save more women, because
save more women,
yeah, but
I'm still not following what you're asking. It's the
yes.
okay. I don't get the question, I guess is what I'm saying. What are you asking me to respond to?
Yeah, yeah. Can you listen to me now, or you
Sure.
can
Yeah.
hear me
Go
now
ahead.
clearly? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah. No, my question is that because of climate change, many women and children are affected. Because
Right.
of climate change, many children and women are affected. So how we can develop a better strategy for saving human lives, like especially for women and children?
Well, I mean, we're all kind of on this planet together. I'm not sure we need to make a gender distinction in terms of the people that are at risk, because we're pretty much all at risk, men and women. It really kind of depends on the culture. For a long while, we've had cultures that were patriarchal by, well, I'm not pronouncing it right, patriarchal by nature, and clearly we need to reach a point where women have greater voice, particularly in politics, and can raise these issues much more aggressively. They are being impacted and affected, but in most countries, they don't have an adequate voice either due to religious leaders or to the way the government's set up. They don't have an adequate voice to be able to adequately protect themselves. Most of the governments are run by men. And we know in business that's really not a good thing. You want a mix of leadership that matches your mix of population, and with women now over 51% of the population, arguably they should be over 51% of the leadership and be representative. But that requires a political will, and that does require, much like happened in the United States years ago when we had the women's movement that eventually got women the right to vote. At some point, the part of the population that is being underrepresented has to stand up and demand to be represented, and then change can happen. As long as you get a situation where a major portion of the population is sounds like Paris gone off. A major portion of the population is disenfranchised, then it's very hard to make progress. So that's probably the first step is the disenfranchisement of women in political decisions needs to be reversed, or at least needs to be corrected, and women need to have a voice in government that is consistent with their size, their position in the population. And until that's done, I just don't see women being adequately represented. I don't believe men can adequately represent women any more than women can adequately represent men. Both groups need to have a voice, and right now women don't have an adequate voice, and so correcting that needs to be a priority. And then I'm going to have to go shortly because they're working on my power, and apparently I've lost power, so I've got a limited amount of backup power to work with.
Thank you, Mr. Rob. Dr. Tamanna. Can you unmute, please, Dr. Tamanna?
You're muted.
Yeah, so for example, Melinda Gates is also from her work, she's working on fetal deaths and women's death in developing world during pregnancy. So many of these things, many of the world's philanthropic organizations are doing. So women have certain life challenges which they have to face, and so that kind of reduces their chances of participation. So I mean, giving birth and then helping in the child to grow, for example, in the developing world, is majorly the chance of the woman to do it, and so she is out of workplace. So we need to have policies where women are able to not just give birth but also look after their own well-being, as in like economically sustainable they should become. And these all things are so much linked. If she is not economically independent, she will not get respect. That is the kind of world we have shaped. If it was not this kind of this world, we would not have spoken like that. But that is the way the world is shaped. If you do not have money, for example, within the family, you will not be respected. So women, for example, they are like kept in the kitchens, and they're like, even if they're very educated, and so these things are there. So till the time economic value of women do not increase, the chances that if for fetal deaths, etc., are also going to increase. So education, for example, the government in India is focusing on that, and trying to have bank systems where women are given more money. So these things are there. So many of these things have to be sorted out before women are able to enter workplace, and and yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Rob, what's your closing remarks for today's session?
Well, climate change is certainly a significant event we need to mitigate. The recent dire reports out of places like the University of Oregon indicate that we don't get this stuff addressed much more quickly than we are addressing it. That sometime around 2050, we're going to be in a lot of pain, and we'll begin to see a massive loss of arable land, food, and clean water. And we're already seeing the beginnings of that with forest fires at unprecedented levels, and climate events at unsustainable levels of hurricanes, tornadoes, the melting of the glaciers, the rising of seawater, the flooding of the large metropolitan areas. And that's on top of other natural disasters that have nothing to do with climate change, like earthquakes, which seem to be getting worse at the same time. So being able to really step up and start addressing these problems before they become unaddressable needs to be a priority. And part of that priority needs to be make sure we bring in the disenfranchised groups, the major disenfranchised groups like women and other minorities, and focus everybody on the problem and let their voice be heard. And what everybody can do themselves is, one, monitor their own use and waste and reduce it, and also stay active. When you're given the opportunity to vote, be informed, make sure your news sources are reliable, and then vote your heart. Really don't stay stuck with a particular party or group. Vote where you think it's going to do you the most good, and to do that, you really need to be informed. And so, being informed, being active, and doing your part to make the world a better place is our best chance to actually make the world a better place.
Yes, I agree with Rob also that green parties are there in Europe, for example. Many are existing there, and so we have to be sensible enough to elect parties which are like taking up this particular agenda as one of their major goals. And Earth's energy budget needs to be there, which is not just for one country or two countries, but for the whole world. This is our Earth. It's meant for us, and for it to survive through generations, it has to be protected now or never. So this is the approach we have to have, and power has to be shown in this particular area rather than in the wars. So till the time that happens, and that doesn't happen, we'll still see deterioration of environment, and global warming, etc. So yes, my closing remarks would be that climate model needs to be built. Many our people are like actually working towards it. So a composite climate budget, which includes not just scholars but also the people, the indigenous population, women, men, older people, and taking youth together, who are the ones who are going to be affected by it, and minorities together. A world which is more sustainable would be able to be developed, and we need to be positive about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rob, and thank you, Dr. Tamanna, for joining today's session. I request all of our audience, please share our content. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.